Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, episode 58. It's your host, Justin, with
Kenny.
And we have Mike Elliott, EPS officer, president of the Edmonton Police Commission.
Police Association.
Police Association, sorry, yes. Thanks, Kenny. We're going to get into talking about becoming a police officer, mental health and depression, PTSD, potentially from trauma on both sides of the fence, being a police officer and being a criminal or / ex-convict. Restorative justice, house arrest, and reintegration programs. Mike's dream program, Kenny's ongoing programs and developing programs, as well as mine. But before we get into that, we have to pay some bills. So shout outs to Liam Connolly at Connolly Law for all of your Canadian law, will, estate, and media issues. Google Liam Connolly at Connolly Law. For all of your counseling needs, such as addiction and family counseling, please Google adaras.ca. That's ADARS.ca. The famous Chris Tuchet will be able to accommodate you through Skype or FaceTime for your mental health needs, regardless of your geographical location. He has quite the responsible rates. So, Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm not too bad, my friend. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really glad that you're here, actually. I really happy that you're here. Thank you for coming in and sharing your time with us.
No problem, Justin. Ken, it's my pleasure, my friend.
How's Ken this morning?
I'm really good. I'm stoked to be here. You know, like, this is huge for us, for me and Justin, like, to be able to sit down with a police officer and, like, talk about whatever. It's really huge. It shows, like, you know, if we can change, anybody can change.
Well, and if I could interject as well, I also think that this could open up dialogue from police officers to arrestees throughout the board. You know what I mean? I think that dialogue has to happen between police officers and those that they arrest when reform happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, times are changing, right? We know that policing of the 50s, the 70s, the 90s, and today has evolved. And I think communication and empathy and understanding goes along with that. So having that ability to talk to the people that you interact with on a daily basis, whether that's just walking down the street or making that arrest, I think that is an avenue where we should develop more and more, because we're always looking for ways to I'll just back up for a sec. So we know that arresting people and putting them in jail does not solve the issue, right? It just takes care of the problem short term. It doesn't take care of the issues that people are having long term. So I think having that interaction is one mechanism that we can use to get back to everyone.
Excellent. So let's talk about your career as becoming a police officer from youngest years to current.
I want to know why you became a cop too.
Okay, no problem. To give you guys some background, I was born and raised in Newfoundland. So it's a small outport. So it's 120 people. We didn't have no gas station, no corner store, no street lights, nothing like that. So you knew everybody. You grew up helping everyone, because if you needed anything, you always go to your neighbor.
Where's your accent?
I need a few beers or get really excited or get from the guys back home.
Okay.
And, or maybe I'll get you guys screeched in. And so unless I go, we'll come over the hill by, what do you do tonight?
Oh, shit, there it is.
Yes, my friend. Yeah. But growing up back home was that we always had to help one another, no matter what happened. And my parents always instilled the values that work hard and respect one another and help each other out. So one of the things for me, like as young as I can remember, we always helped one another. Like, I volunteered with the local fire department, so I was a volunteer there for 6 years. One of the things, it was sort of funny, but like 120 people, you know everyone. But every Christmas, one of the things near and dear to my heart was I dress up as Santa Claus, get in the back of the fire truck, and we go around the bay, around the harbor, and we'd hand out gifts to all the kids.
Nice.
And then we would go and see the elderly who couldn't make it out and deliver them little baskets to say thanks, you know. And the sad part is that every year, you know, of course, life is life, and somebody would pass away, and it was always a sad part. But from a very young age, I've always wanted to be a cop. And the reason for me is that I just wanted to help people. I wasn't sure how to do it, but I just knew I wanted to do it. So I remember finishing high school and writing my exam for the RCMP, and the corporal at the time said, Mike, you passed, my friend, but sorry, you didn't make it high enough in the marks, so maybe come back in a few years and try. So I was like, okay. So I ended up joining the military, and after 5 years there, I met some guys here. I was posted here in Edmonton. And
PPCLI?
No, 408 Squadron, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, with the Air Force there. So I met some guys there, so I was doing their scheduling. And they were full-time cops and reservists in the Air Force. And they're like, hey, Mike, what are you doing here? You know, about the right age. I was like 26 at the time. And he goes, he started talking to me, and I said, yeah, I always want to be a cop, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, why don't you come join us? And I went, I don't know. But long story short, it was 2004 I applied. And I applied to Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa. And I said, whoever says yes first, that's where I'm headed. And within 3 months, Edmonton said yes. Had some friends out here, so flew out here in the, it was fall of actually it was February of 05. I got released from the military like on February, like say 1st. And I think my first day of training started February 5th. So I just stayed with my good friend Brett. He allowed me to sleep on his futon. And I went through the training. So in a nutshell, it just went, there's always something I wanted. I know I wasn't successful, but I knew I didn't want to give up helping in some capacity. So I knew I couldn't help as a police officer first. So I knew the military was another mechanism I could use to at least help the country in some way, shape, or form. But I wanted to get back into, I say my roots from growing up in Newfoundland, you just help one another. So yeah, lo and behold, they accepted me, and here I am today, in my 14th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was training?
Training wasn't too bad. I think we had a class of about 40, and you get your all walks of life, right? So you've got, I remember we had like people who were hairdressers, construction. I think there were about 7 or 9 of us that are ex-military. So for me, going through the military training, I knew what to expect, and I did not find the police training as difficult. I'm not saying it wasn't hard, don't get me wrong. Some of the fitness and studying still had to keep up, but we quickly learned that we had to help one another. So my strength could be, say, drill, because you had to learn how to march properly, whereas somebody else could be stronger in the fitness aspect. So we just learned to work as a team and help each other.
Sorry to interrupt. In training, was there anything for like mental health? Like, did they teach you about anything about arresting people with mental health disorders, or like why they may be in the circumstance that they're in due to mental health conditions?
That's a difficult question to answer, because I can tell you I cannot really remember, because in class you are force-fed so much information in a short period of time. I do know that some of the training was preparing our own mental health, mental strength, to deal with the effects of what we're going to face. You know, we were OC sprayed, which some people just call it pepper spray, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know what the effect was, and we understood that you get sprayed, and so then you have an understanding of what, if you have to use it on somebody, you can help him or her get through it, right, for the recovery. But in regards to specific mental health, I can't recall anything like that in training. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I know that's it is being used today. I know that. So I can't speak for myself in 05, but today mental health training is an aspect of police training.
Cool. There was an episode that Kenny and I were talking on a while ago, where Kenny was expressing a story. This is what comes to my mind right away, about a time when he was in his dad's house and he sprayed bear spray, and his dad just walked in there like a trooper, like there was nothing wrong with it. So when you're like OC, I was like, yeah, we've probably been hit with that. I don't know. Have you? I know I have. Have you been hit with pepper spray?
Not from a police officer.
I got it in the remand center.
Oh,
I got hit and I was put down to the ground.
Did they spray your balls with it?
No, they hit me in the face. I was drinking, so I think I started a fight with one of the correctional officers, and then that's how they put me down.
You're drinking jailhouse brew?
No, I was drunk in there.
Oh, in the
like still going in.
Oh, okay.
Well, I remember being sprayed. The training officer at the time, he shook it at me. He said, look straight at me, Mike. And I went, okay. And he goes, open your eyes. And he goes, no, open your eyes. So I had to physically take my fingers, pry my eyes open and keep them open. And he goes, don't move. And he sprays me and he goes, oh, this container is empty. Stay there. And my eyes are burning out of my skull. So he gets another container and shakes that one up and sprays me again. So I was like, oh, so I got the full effects. It was like deep into my eyes. So I
was it twice.
Oh yeah. So that burned like a mother for, I think it was the next day before it was truly, I can say it was after the effects were over.
So let me ask you, in your patrol career, what was the best thing, like what was the height that one memory that comes back to you that's in a positive light from being on patrol?
There's probably a couple I can say, but one positive thing for me was, it goes on two aspects. There's one with the community and with some issues. So one thing that comes to mind is that I love the fact that when I was, we had an opportunity every year you go talk to students. And sort of, some people call it read-in week, but sometimes you can just do it on your own. So I had an opportunity to go and talk to a bunch of kids who were in, I think, grade 1 at the time. And of course, you sit down with them, and I know they're at a young age, but you try to influence them, right? So I remember they were in my uniform, and you got everything, and I'm asking the kids, so what do you think is my best tool? And they're like, oh, your gun, your taser, your baton, your pepper spray. And I was like, yeah, no, it's a tool, that's a tool, it's a tool. I said, but what do you think my best tool is? And they're stunned. And I look at them, I point to my mouth, and they're like, what? I said, my mouth and my ears, that's my best weapon. And they're like, you can tell the confusion. And I know I'm talking the, grade 1s.
Yeah.
And you can tell. So I said, no. I said, my best tool is I listen and I talk. And I said, I can have all the tools I want in my belt. I said, but if I don't understand what you're going through, if I can't talk to you, I'll never get through to you, and you'll never get through to me. Because if I go in there with a closed mind and just say, you're not complying, and I just physically grab you or use baton on somebody, it's like, am I really getting through to that person? I'd rather talk and talk and talk to try to bring down a situation and get it under control. And you can see them going, oh, and even some of the teachers that were in the room going like, yeah. And I said, there's no difference in you guys here in class. I said, what do? You don't understand something? You put your hand up, you ask a question. Yeah. You've got to figure that out. And so I love that aspect of dealing with kids and youth to get that message across. Is like, no, take your time. There's no rush or anything. Use your mouth, use your ears. From on the street side, I can remember it was a condo. They had problems with, they said it was a drug house next door. So there's people coming and going all day, all night, and they said they were sick and tired of it. And so I know everyone can use a different method, but I actually knocked on the door and introduced myself. And I said, hey, I'm Mike. I know for a fact there's drugs going on. I can smell it. And I said, it's got to stop. And did I end up arresting anybody? No. But all I did was I stayed there. So every time I do a report, I went and sat on a chair, waited outside the room. So people would come up to walk in and they go, oh, it's a cop here. I'm not going in, right? And they go, oh, shit, I'm not going in there. And so they turn and walk away. Or I'd park right outside the main door in the front of my patrol vehicle, and I'd be sitting there, and they'd walk in, and I'd walk out and start following them up. Not stopping them like a street check or anything like that, but I just walk in, and, as they walk up the stairs, I'd walk up the stairs. And you could tell they walk up to the door, and they're like, oh, this is not the place I'm looking for. And they keep walking. So eventually they got the message, and I just go back and knock on the door and say, hey, I let you know that, I notice your traffic is getting lower. Not too many people showing up. And one person in the room was like F you, like F off. Yeah. And other people was like, yeah, we get it. And I think within about 3 to 4 weeks, they moved out. Oh, wow. And the condo board actually wrote me a letter and said, thanks, we didn't know what to do. We're at our wits' end. But it gets back, I solved that specific issue, and which was nice. They wrote a letter and said thank you, but I just think, well, I'm just doing my job. But it still didn't help those people that were in that condo, or the people, whatever, if they were addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol or both, or whatever the case may be. That gets back to, I was junior, knowing that I was trying to fix an issue, but I still didn't help those men and women that were going into that condo buildings. They've got their own concerns, right? Yeah. So how do you get back to those? But that's two little things that...
that's why there's guys like me and Justin that are in the trenches trying to shift the perception and awareness of those people.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like I said, like I had said before, there are glimmers when reformity happens. There's glimmers when an ex-convict, or whatever you want to call them, ex-offender, right? Where they're given an opportunity to talk to a police officer, and they can they can almost redo the interaction with the police again, and it becomes on the positive side, right? So I think that can happen in time, but I'll say this is, it takes us to make the first step. If we don't decide that we need to go to treatment for our own addiction, so on and so forth, and get the help that we need, unfortunately, the police are pretty well at wit's end. There's nothing that the police can really do in order to make somebody go to treatment. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it needs to be at a voluntary capacity. That's kind of my beef with justice. We'll get into that a little bit later when we go to restorative justice.
Yeah, and just if I may, I find that part because when I was working on White Ave, we'd pick up people and say, they're addicted to, say, alcohol. And we bring them down to the treatment center. But the problem is you can't force somebody to stay in the treatment center, right? You bring them in there, say, man, go get treatment. Yeah, thanks for bringing me down. I appreciate it. But when that addiction hits, right, they walk out.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. And that's so frustrating from family members and as a cop because you're going, I'm trying to help him or her get off the street, but the addiction is so strong, right? That's what brings them back out of that building, and it goes back to the next hit. So I know we can talk about that later in our dream program that you bring up.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even like the word addiction. I think that there's a negative stigma around it, and I think people can use it as like kind of a cop-out or a reason to continue and perpetuate their usage or just stay at the level that they're at. One of the things that we like to, instead of saying like, hi, my name's Kenny and I'm addicted to whatever, we like to change the term to it's not an addiction, it's just an unbeneficial habit.
One of the things that I usually say is I'm a recovered addict. Like I don't have to go back to addiction. I'm recovered today, right? And it takes a lot of work in order to be recovered, and the process of recovery can be short if you decide that it's going to be short, right? So like I don't turn my back on the wreckage of my past. I look at it as actually a notch in my belt that I've become better because of it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's all about perception and where you're going. But essentially, Kenny and I both have the same solution in regards to, one, we're not reoffending today. Secondly, we're not using anymore. Third, we're positive in a better capacity for our community today. Right. So if those are the three outcomes of the process that we went through in order, like through the process that we've gone through, and this is the outcome of it. I mean, regardless of how you get there, those are the outcomes.
Yeah, and I just want to let you guys know, and your listeners, like I give kudos to you both because I think you've got to walk in your shoes to truly understand and appreciate what you guys have gone through. And I applaud you both for the steps you've taken because I know it's not easy. I try to imagine and put myself in your shoes, but until you've gone through it, no difference in mental health, right? I can tell you what it is. But I just want to let you guys know and your listeners know too, and this is something for me, this is not speaking for every police officer, but one thing I found difficult early on in my career is that where I came from, a community and the military of helping one another and knew each other, when I moved here, I started downtown, I lived downtown. Everything that I dealt with on a daily basis, I thought this city was a whole. And the reason I say that is, it's like, oh my God, every time I deal with somebody, like there's drugs involved, there's alcohol, there's weapons, communicable diseases of some type. And I was like, where am I working? And I didn't look at the positive sides of what this city and the people here can offer because I was so focused on just dealing with every day, responding to a call, that my perception is that everything was bad.
Yeah, and that's got to weigh on your mental health too.
Yeah, because it was my old Sarge. He said, Mike, you need to change the scenery. And I remember transferring from downtown to Southwest Division. And it was actually South, I think, at the time, but then it split. But regardless. And I remember somebody coming up to me in a coffee shop and goes, hey, can I buy you a coffee? And I was like, what? You want to buy me a coffee? What do you want? And that was my attitude. Because I was like, if you're buying a police officer something, you must want something in return. Never realizing that it's like, hey, man, this is just another citizen here wanting to buy me a coffee.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb went off for me. It's like, Mike, it's like I got to change my mindset, change my thinking. Is that not everyone is bad. And even if I think they're bad, there's a good side there somewhere. Because I'm going off on a tangent here, but no one ever wakes up one day and goes, I'm going to be an alcoholic.
Yeah, no.
I can't wait to drink, No one ever wakes up and says, I'm going to be hooked on meth. I'm going to create my habit. And
unbeneficial habit.
Unbeneficial habit, right? And get hooked on that. There's an underlining reason somewhere that somebody got hooked on that. And that's what we got to focus on to find out what went wrong for those people there. And no difference with, I remember there was a guy walking on White Avenue. And the best of my knowledge, he used to be a nurse at the U of A. got an injury of some sort, got hooked on that painkiller, started taking painkillers, started stealing them, lost his job as a nurse, and now he's on White Ave homeless. But every person on the street, and you guys know this, you come from a life somewhere. And it's hard when you're used to that type of lifestyle. That's your environment that you grow up with, and you don't know anything different, that you think, well, this is life, and that's all it is. And so it's hard to realize that there's more than just what you're used to. There's a different world out there, and it's hard to break that cycle, but it's out there.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think change of scenery is a big deal. I mean, you look at where Kenny and I come from, we're probably on the latter end of poverty, not so close to middle, like middle income, and so when we're growing up, where we're at is we see
all the things we don't have.
Well, and the hand to mouth, like it's always hand to mouth. So then what ends up happening is either you get a positive influence and maybe become a police officer if that's where you're coming from out of the ghetto, so to say. But for most of us, our heroes are like people like Mom Boucher, because he's the rags to riches Robin Hood guy. And growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, he's the one who gave us turkey. When they did the toy drive, I mean, really, when you look at the toy drive, what was that really dictating to that organization specifically? It was, how much can we get away with on the street because the society has given us so much in return. This came from the Italian side in Montreal too. Like, the Italians would do this thing called the Feast of St. Anthony. Well, what do you think they're doing? They're parading this thing, and then the community pins all this money on it, and they can dictate by how much money comes in from the community, what they can get away with in that community, because the community isn't going to say anything, because underlining the community knows that organization is the one who's putting on that feast. Yeah. And again, that organization that Mom Boucher used to run, they did the same thing with the toy drive. They learned from the Italians on what that was doing. And so in my neighborhood, I remember when the bombs were going off, right? And the madame would come on the news and she would say, look, if you live in La Salle or Park X or Jacques Cartier or any of these areas, you have to be in bed by 9 o'clock because it's a curfew. Why? Because Hells Angels is out tonight and the police aren't answering phone calls. Well, what does that tell you as a kid? Right? Like, and that was her literal wording. They're out blowing things up, right? So as a kid, the street lights go out and you hear a shotgun go off in your hallway, call the police, and they're like, oh, what neighborhood? 911 picks up, and then they just say, we're not coming.
Yeah.
Right?
What does that teach you?
And so, I mean, again, for those, and this will probably fall into that programs piece, but for kids, who are in that poverty situation, it's not fair that they're poor. Poverty shouldn't be known to the children, but unfortunately, this is what rapidly increases in that mentality of I'm getting mine. Yeah. Because that's where we came from. We came from a place where our mentality was hell or high water, I'm getting mine. Right? And it's not so much because of addiction in the beginning, it's because of the feeling of poverty and the exclusivity of poverty from being able to enjoy going to go play hockey, or from being able to go and do these kinds of things with impunity because we just don't have the money. Mom and dad just don't have that, right? So again, I think on both sides of the coin, that change of scenery is huge, right? And it does weigh on into mental health with depression. I mean, that as a kid, I was 9 years old. I expressed this in one of the episodes just a little while ago. 9 years old was my first suicide attempt. Why? Depression. I was depressed.
Excluded, no money, didn't see a way out.
That's right. Trying
to find your place.
And then next thing you know, you take that first hoot of my first drug of choice was opiate. I never smoked marijuana or hash before that. Like, I was right into like smoking heroin, and that was from stealing somebody's stash. Right? I didn't know what I was doing.
Other than weed, my first experience with hard drugs was I found a half ounce of crystal meth on the living room floor when I was 13.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's I feel good and life is okay. I'm going to get mine now.
Yeah, no kidding.
You get that courage instantaneously. I'm getting mine, right? No more fear. There's the police, from seeing them as like, I remember DARE program. and I'll never forget this. I was in DARE program, and they're showing us what supposedly marijuana is, but it's oregano in a bag. And I'm like, I have pot in my pocket. Like, I'm just sweating because I have drugs on me. And the DARE dog, like the drug dog, Storm, is in the school. And I'm just sweating. I'm in elementary school, right? Like, and then the police officer's like, this is what marijuana looks like. And I'm thinking in my head, no, it's not.
Hey, I have a question. This just came up. With weed now being legal, what are the rules and regulations for youth in regards to marijuana?
The age, I apologize to you guys and your listeners. I should know the exact, I think here is going to be like age 19, just like alcohol. 18, like alcohol. And depends on the province. So it's still not permitted for youth, like a 14-year-old can't go and purchase it.
Can't go and purchase it. But what if you catch a kid with weed? Is there charges specifically for youth? Like, what's the allowable amount that they can have on them?
Well, I got to look at the new legislation because I haven't gone through it in depth, because I know it used to be like 30 grams was the. But you got to look at every member. You have discretion.
Yeah.
So when I came across somebody smoking a joint, they say behind blues on white, 9 times out of 10, I just took it, submitted it for destruction, and that was it. Maybe take their name, put a street check on them, and say found John Smith smoking marijuana behind blues on white type of thing, because it's a legitimate stop, and I had it. But 9 times out of 10, I never charged anybody unless it was like a high quantity of it.
Yeah.
But for a little baggie and things like that, it was like, no, 9 times out of 10, it was my discretion or a member's discretion, and they would just take submit for destruction and just put information in on it.
So let's dive into mental health and depression.
Sure, my friend.
I think, and the PTSD side, just to kind of swivel foot a little bit in the topic. I don't know if you're willing to disclose it, but you were talking about basically a dead on arrival call you were talking about?
Yeah, every member will have their own little story, and I'll just say that for mental health, you could go through your whole career and you may seem that you're okay, or you could have a couple incidents and you're fine. For most part, I can tell you that when I started on the street, I thought I was strong, and what I mean by that is I'm healthy, and there's no problems at home. My parents are healthy, my family are healthy, no problems, so I can handle the stressors. Issues that come up with members, and not just members at all, but just anyone in society, throw in, but I'll speak from a police perspective. I'm going to call after call, but next thing you know, my parent has cancer, and I've got a kid who's getting bullied at school, and I just found out that my sister was beaten up or something like that by her ex-boyfriend type of thing. So you have all these stressors, so you're stressed out at home, and now you come into work. And I'll give you an idea, like, this is not what happened, but here's an example. You can go to collision after collision after collision, and you've got all these stressors like I just told you. So as you roll up on a collision, you go, well, that looks like my wife's car. And look, you see a backpack. It's like, geez, that's not my daughter's backpack. And so you start thinking, it's like, oh my God, is that my wife's car? Is that my daughter in the back? So that could be the one stressor that sets you off. But to give you a prime example, I ended up going to a check on welfare, which is family hasn't heard from this person for a while. So we end up going to do a knock on the door, no answer. Talk to the family, get permission to go in, and I just tell everybody stay out. And I go downstairs, and this gentleman ended up taking a gun under his chin and committed suicide. And not to get too graphic with your listeners, but his head was split open, and there was like teeth in the ceiling. There was skin splattered everywhere and blood splattered. And I was like, that's fine, just another suicide. But what I discovered for the next 2 months, every night I woke up almost like in a cold sweat, because I pictured this person with his head blown apart, but I pictured my dad's face on his head. And so that haunted me for probably a month and a half, 2 months. And I kept going to myself like that old school mentality, like, suck it up, buttercup. It's like part of the job, get on with it, move on. Not realizing that this is playing a part that was screwing me up in the head. And I found it really, really difficult. And that's just one example of how things hit you. And I'm sure you guys both have examples as well.
Yeah, and like, that's really important because like we've been talking about that, especially lots in the last episode, about that old mentality, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
And how like for so many years we were taught as like young boys, you're a man up.
Yeah.
Don't show weakness.
Don't show weakness. And I think like there's a lot of problems with that because we're even though we're men, we're all hypersensitive to certain things, and we all have vulnerabilities that we've been trying to like mask up as kids. And I think like that in itself causes stigma, and it causes inability to make like deep connections because you're afraid to be vulnerable around people because of this old mentality of suck it up, buttercup, or be a man. And like, you know, it's Movember, right? It's
Well, this episode will be out after that.
after Movember.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, but even in regards to Movember, when we did the episode of Movember 2,
Yeah.
right, we talked about how we as men, you know, we have this primal instinct to kill, right? Women, it's a primal instinct of nurture, right? And the issue with men is, as we're being raised, is we're told to suppress that. So what ends up happening then is you overcompensate. And then when you do hear suck it up, buttercup, be a man, all this stuff, you take to that like it's the best candy you've ever had, because it placates to something that you've been suppressing for so long. And now you feel this validation just as your primal piece of being a man. So then what ends up happening is now you have this overcompensation. You're really a very sensitive person, and you've never learned how to associate your feelings from the primal being of just being a male.
Yep.
You know, whether you're a boy, a man, whatever it is, the fundamental age of development has been skewed because we've been told suppress. It's like this. How do you ever, you were in the military, how do you ever learn how to defend a country if you've never fought? You don't. When two little boys are roughhousing in the playground, guess what they're doing? They're teaching each other how to defend each other without actually hurting each other, because they're not of strength yet enough to hurt each other. I mean, I box. So why is it advantageous to have 7- and 8-year-olds boxing in the gym? Because they can't actually knock each other out. It's impossible. But what they do learn is they learn how to defend themselves and how to offensively attack if need be. You can't expect men to just abandon that primal piece of what we are. We have a fight, flight, or freeze response, and typically about 70% of men will fight before they run. That's just, you've seen it on the job. I mean, how many times when you go to arrest somebody, they're going to fight you, maybe not fist to your face or fist to your body, but they're not going to go willingly putting their hands behind their back.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And it goes back to our training, because that's the training that our men and women have to go through, is that when they encounter that resistance, is not to, whoa, back off. We have to learn to keep engaging, right? To
Control the situation.
yeah, you got to take control of the situation. Depends on the circumstances, but our primary is, you know, safety to the public and safety for ourselves. So if you encounter a man or a woman who's being potentially violent, we're trained to get in there and de-escalate that and take control of the situation. So you do have to overcome that fight or flight and learn to engage, you know, and retrain, almost like retrain your brain to say, I've got to engage myself here. And that's part of our training that we have to go to, is that we have to resolve the issue. And how do we resolve that issue? Well, we also learn, it's like, well, there's de-escalation techniques. And that's when I get back to use my mouth and use my ears, right? That's my first line that I try to use to de-escalate a situation. And then unfortunately, there's times you got to ramp it up, because, right, it's, you know, it's difficult to go in if somebody's got a knife pulled on you. It's like, well, okay, I'll try to talk him down, or try to talk her down, but I still have to use my wits about me, because I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want anyone else in the public get hurt.
Yeah.
So it's hard at times when I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but it's hard when people can be armchair quarterbacks. So when things have done, people always go, well,
awesome.
why didn't you just like shoot that person in the arm? Why didn't you shoot that person in the leg? Why didn't you use OC spray when the person had a knife? And you got to realize that well, we have to protect others as well as ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's always easy because when we do things, there's times you got to do it within a split second. And we try to do the best job at that moment. And I know not everyone will agree, and I get that. And that's a fact of life, fortunately or unfortunately. But for me, I try to do the best job that I can given the circumstances and given the information that I have. But I know is it always perfect? No, it isn't. And we're human, and we always make mistakes too, but we just got to learn from that and move on.
Well, and I also think that, like, I worked in a shelter, and it's in the same capacity of de-escalation. We all take that training, right? We also take the training of how to escort somebody out of the building if you just can't get them to calm down. And it was an intox, so everybody's intoxicated, and this is what we were dealing with. And then you would get the person who's claiming suicide, and then you would have to call a CREMS. So here in Edmonton, CREMS is basically a psychologist and a doctor and a police officer and a ambulance. The response time was good some days, and some days it wasn't. And the only reason for that, I believe, was because the health professionals weren't actually on call. They were on a 4-hour on call. So they would get called, and then 4 hours they were actually coming up on their shift. Regardless of that, though, what I'm getting at is in the de-escalation piece, there are times where there is just no other option but to grab or control the person, because they are going to hurt other people, especially in the shelter, in that situation where you're sleeping 2 inches from the next person. And what I always learned writing my my critical incident reports, my CIRs or whatever, was hindsight's 20/20. And when they're sitting there saying you could have did this or you could have did that, yeah, that's fine that you're nitpicking my critical incident report, but the reality is you weren't there in the situation. And not being in the situation, there's a feeling that you feel. There's an intuition that happens, and you're like, this person's actually going to hurt this other person, and this needs to stop, right? And so the other person who's reading it, I think that's one piece that I always found from my management in the shelter, in regards not in the same escalation, but the same feelings, is that it's nice to nitpick after the situation. However, you weren't actually there, like de-escalation or not. They didn't teach you how to say, we don't want to do this. This way you're claiming that you're with them as a team, right? They kind of teach you that in de-escalation, but they don't. They more say use I statements as opposed to use and all this stuff. And that's fine. But when somebody's intoxicated, they're triggered anyways. It doesn't matter. You can say I, you, all you want. And the next thing you know, they start swinging, So, I mean, kudos to you though. And I think like the practice of that again and again allows it to become a little bit, it almost becomes like riding a bicycle. Yeah, you know what I mean?
And I'll disclose too that it can be mentally draining, because I know this was I'm not saying was the factor, but it was a factor. I think when I went through I'll let your listeners know. I went through depression, anxiety. I was off work for a number of months.
Was this after the suicide attempt?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But I find like I keep reverting back to White Avenue because it's a busy place. And the patience that you have to have dealing with an intoxicated or drunk person night after night after night, it's taxing, because you're using everybody your strength to, okay, relax, calm down, it's okay, just step outside, come on outside and talk to me. And you have to use your empathy and every trick that you can think of to de-escalate a situation, because I don't want to get into physical force because I don't want to get hurt. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hurt that person, nor do I want anyone else in the public get hurt.
Yeah.
So your patience runs out at a period of time, and you'll see people that work on the beat. It's like there's a shelf life for working on the beat because they only can take so much, because they need a break. And for a long period of time, like when I was dealing with the public, I got to the point I don't want to go out in the public. And I did not want to go near downtown, near White Ave, any place where there's going to be a crowd. I hated crowds. I can't begin to emphasize how much I dislike crowds. My patience level was just gone.
Yeah,
and
but doesn't a special event police officer make like $90-something an hour?
Yeah, they can. Yeah. But it all depends, right, on what you can handle.
Yeah.
Right. Some people are like, I'm just going to do my job and that's it. Other people just love work. right? So it all depends on
For $93 an hour, if I was a cop, I'd be at all the events.
You know what, though? In saying that, you haven't been to EYOC yet.
No.
But when we go, this is what I noticed. Being able to walk in and walk out on my own, my PTSD is 100% triggered as soon as I hear the clicking of the doors.
Yeah.
As soon as I hear that, man, I'm not Justin anymore. I'm a convict walking in. That's where my mind is. And the bubble, they have the bubble or whatever right in that room.
Right where the guards sit?
Yeah. So I think as a police officer, just to try to step in their shoes, let's say one bad thing happens when you're in a special event. Next thing you know, you never want to go back there, because as soon as you see that group, that crowd, your PTSD is triggered.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that situation anymore. You're going to, money or not, there's not enough money in. I mean, how much money would you want to go back into jail? You know, there's not enough money. That mental hell that we went through, you couldn't pay me enough. You know, like my mental health is worth more than that at this point.
I'll sell myself for the dollar. But I'm cheap and easy and trashy, right?
No, but Justin, you hit
Go ahead.
a very valid point, my friend, because got me losing my train of thought here where I was going to go with that. But when you hit those triggers, and because I went down, I went through depression, I went through my anxiety. I know, just like you, when you say, when my stressors get up, I go, whoa, I got to take a step back. And if I don't take a step back, it's like I'm going to lose it. And I just got to disengage from everything. And it's like I just need a few minutes to myself to resettle and get my brains in order again and go, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again, because you know once you're down there, it's a dark, deep place, and you don't want to go back again. And so that's when I always say that going through it provides me more empathy than ever before, because when I understand or see somebody that's going through depression, anxiety, if they have PTSD, whatever the case may be, anything that's affecting your mental health, my heart goes out to him or her, because I'm going, I've been there. I don't want anyone else to go down that road, so I'll do whatever I can to help them. So that's why I applaud you guys here again to say you've been down there, and if you can help that one person, to me, that's the step in the right direction, because that's a hellhole to be in, and it sucks the life out of you. And so thanks, guys. And once again, though, thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having that perspective, because I know that that's going to rub off on the other cops that don't have that attitude yet. And, you know, you give them a new perspective and help them empathize and have compassion while they're working and they're dealing with stuff, instead of having that tough guy, fuck you, I'm going to throw you in jail attitude.
Well, and I think that this kind of is a good segue into restorative justice. And the reason why I say this is because I think, and I'm going to try to step into the role of a police officer, try to put my feet into those shoes in this capacity. I don't think police officers see the outcome that Kenny and I have through reform. And I think because of that, let's face it, a lot of the work that police officers do, especially on the beat, it becomes profiling. Because, I mean, typically if you walk like a duck, you talk like a duck, you look like a duck, you're acting like a duck, right? Now let's replace the word duck with criminal. You know, if that's what you're doing, the likelihood is the police officer wants to be around when a crime is in progress. I mean, most police officers don't want to be showing up after the crime, which is typically what happens, but that's only because of the nature of the job and the context of the call came in, therefore we're going to it. But when you know who's identifiable, this is a criminal, and they do have a past of reoffending, well, guess what? You kind of want to keep them on your radar, right? So I think because of that capacity, that's what makes it, on Kenny and I, for our side of the fence in the beginning of this, made it a little bit difficult. And it was only because that generalization was put upon us. And I think one of the things that you and I both rised to was the fact that it was my onus to take that label off of me, right? And I think a lot of people who are trying to get into reform from the ex-convict side, right? Like, we're trying to reform, the big step that they can't get to is that mental break where they go, it's my responsibility to change the perception from the police service to the way how they're looking at me.
Because that stigma is put on you.
Yeah.
Right? You carry that stigma with you. And it's hard. And I'll even say, like, When I told some of my colleagues I'm coming to talk to you guys, some people out there were like, "What? Are you for real? You're going to talk to like past criminals?" I went, "Yeah," and that's something they've got to get past too, right? So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
So I know you guys are talking about you got to get that stigma off and help reach out and show them. It's like, no, I've moved past that. And the reverse onus is there too.
Yeah.
We got to realize it's like, yeah, we all make mistakes, but all depends what steps do you take to get over that. Some are small mistakes, some are larger. So
it's having a ripple effect, and like that phone call that I answered just before we started talking was actually a call from Bowden Penitentiary from my friend that's there. And like I openly told him, yeah, well, like we're having a cop on the show. Like I already went for coffee with him. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm excited to like have this conversation on air, and it's already having a ripple effect and like changing the attitudes of people that are still in custody. Like one of my friends just got out and he's in a halfway house, and he called me. He's like, "Kenny, you're doing so good. How can I, be part of whatever you're doing? And like, I got to change my life." This guy is career criminal his whole life. He's Indigenous, suffered sexual abuse as a kid, been hooked on meth, crack, heroin since he was like 12 years old. And I just threw it out there because like I just wanted to see what kind of effect it would have on this guy. So when he called me a couple days ago and I was telling him, yeah, well, guess what, bro? You're never gonna guess who we're having on the podcast. And I was like, yeah, I'm having this cop. He's a high up like ranking cop, and he's like, you know what, man? That's awesome. He's like, for you to go and do that is inspiring for me.
Yeah.
Because like even though like growing up in here and having friends and family that are involved in shit from the get-go since I was born, involved in crime, like when I went into the prison system at first, like I wasn't scared because they're like, "Oh, you're this guy's kid? Oh, here you go." And I got treated like gold, right? I got everywhere I went in jail, I got treated like gold. But then like one day it clicked for me. It's like, why the fuck do I want to be king of Turd Island? You know what I mean? Like, why do I want to be the guy of Turd Island? You're still on Turd Island, right?
Well, and I think that kind of touches back to changing the scene, right? Because we as kids growing up, really we were high risk. That's what we'd be considered because of the indoctrination of our family.
Yeah.
Flat out. It's an indoctrination. I mean, those values that are instilled in us, for the most part, haven't done shit for me as an adult.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Like my masculinity was based upon how much I could drink and how many drugs I could do.
Yeah,
right?
Mine was how many girls I could fuck.
Yeah, exactly. So that being said, the high risk, those are the ones that almost through this restorative justice need to be in the fold of police. You know what I mean? This is where, like, we talk about the Big Brother Association. This is like little boys who don't have
big
fathers.
Brothers, big sisters.
Yeah, big brothers, big sisters. In my opinion, if the police were to be able to do something like that with the high-risk youth that are coming out of corrections, I mean, let's face it, corrections for youth, those two words, in my opinion, shouldn't even meet, right?
Yeah.
And when we're talking about restorative justice, it takes you to become an adult to get house arrest. You don't really have house arrest as a kid. They just let you out. And then you go back to your parents' place. They're not going to breach you. You know what I mean? Like there's no life skills being taught in that, right? And then back to reintegrative programs, which we have in the federal prison system. Do we have it in the province? Like they almost, and I'm just going to spell this out to you, Mike, because I really want to hear your opinion on this. You have to offend higher to get an indictable in order to get a reintegrative process into community.
Back into society.
If you do something that's only a summary conviction, so just for those Americans, summary convictions are like, they're not felonies, they're less than a felony, and our indictables are the same thing as an American felony. So in Canada, you go from summary as a provincial charge or like a state charge, which was what it would be in America. And then basically what Canada asks you is to graduate into a higher end crime in order to give you the programs that are needed. To me, this is ludicrous. It's insanity the way how the system is set up. So you as a police officer, how do you feel about that process?
It's funny you bring that up because I remember arresting a couple guys on a summary conviction that you talk about. And they've said, well, Mike, what's the point? I'll be out in a couple of days.
Yep.
And you know my problem? I'm right back in the same environment,
Yeah,
same
homeless.
location,
Yeah.
same people surrounding me. He said, so here I've got an addiction, a habit,
Unbeneficial
habit. And what do you think my influence? I've got everybody around me doing, like, say, heroin.
Yeah.
And I'm addicted to heroin, and I'm right back on the street again. He said, what do you think I'm going to do? He said, I'm going to crack under pressure and go right back on it again.
Yeah.
And he goes, you can try to take me to a place to get better, but my addictions hit me so hard, I leave and I'm right back in that fold.
Yeah.
So if I can make a segue, I know we're talking about restorative justice and a treatment program.
Yeah.
If money wasn't an issue, I would love to have the ability, and some people may not like this, and that's fine, right? Because everybody's got their opinions on this, but I would love to be able to take somebody out of that environment that they're in, put them in I'll call it a positive environment where we're surrounded with counseling, physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists. And because because when you get down that rabbit hole so deep and you've got so many issues, you need help all around. Like, there's an analogy to say that sometimes takes a community to raise a child.
Yeah.
And I think this can be very similar in nature. So for the perfect world for me, I'd like to take somebody out of that environment, move them to a safe environment, and have those steps in place that are there to help him or her go through. So if they're going through that withdrawal, the doctor can help them get through. If they need to discuss whatever these issues are, the counseling is there, and you put them in a program that can help them move on. There's no difference in where we have these safe injection sites.
You know, Mike, we may have a board or two for you to sit on down the road here.
Yeah. Well, and I think in saying that, I'm going to give Kenny the floor here real quick so that he can talk to you about some of the programs that he's involved in and then some of the programs that he's developing. Because I think that this fits. I mean, we've been actually waiting for somebody to sit in the podcast in order to be able to expose some of this. We don't really talk about what we do in our personal life. Like, we don't talk about the other jobs that we do aside from the podcast. Yeah. So this actually gives us a really good platform with you sitting here for us to actually disclose. If any of our listeners Google our name, you'll get it. So I'm going to give Kenny the floor here real quick.
So, like, back to the provincial justice system and how inmates are being released with no money, no reintegration back into society, no support groups or nothing like that. Like, literally, you get released from the remand center. They drive you downtown to the old remand center, and they let you out right in front of the cop shop. Mm-hmm. And like a running joke with the sheriffs and a lot of the ignorant guards in the remand is that I'll see you in a month.
Yeah.
I'll see you in a month, buddy, as you're walking out the door.
I remember the old remand center, just real quick, it used to say above, as you were walking out, it would say, and you go take a look at this, it was etched in by marker saying, come again soon.
Oh, really?
That's what it used to say at the old remand center downtown Edmonton here. Yeah.
And so, like, me personally, my experience being incarcerated, I've never made it to the pen, even though I've had lots and lots of indictable charges. I usually ended up getting, like, small pen bits, but in a provincial setting. Like, I would do pen time. I would be in jail for 18 months, 20 months, but I never actually made it to the federal pen. And so, like, I've been in and out 15, 20 times. I don't even know how many, but every time it's starting from scratch, trying to get back my life. I lose my clothes. I lose, like, everything. So I get out with fuck all, but I have had, like, good support on my mom's side from my mom.
And you're lucky you had that, because some people,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. If I didn't have my mom, I wouldn't be here today 100%. I'd already be dead a long time ago, or in the pen doing 25 to life. But so that being said, like, from my own personal life experience, when I went in this last time, one of the programs that I dove into immediately because I knew I needed to change was the boot camp program. And the boot camp program is it was an experiment that was done in the remand center. I think it started in 2013. It's ran by ex-military. You have to do drill and count and all this shit, like count out loud. And there's no fighting, no drugs, no gangs. And on this unit, what I walked into was this program. It was called PEAK, Positive Energy, Action, and Knowledge. And it was an ongoing process. It didn't have a definitive start and end date. And this program talks a lot about restructuring, reframing your mind, using your subconscious to create new belief systems. And so this program was created by Howie Hoggins. He was on the show before in the episode. It's called Hog Wild. He talks about it there. He's really energy type guy. He likes metaphysics. He's law of attraction. He does Reiki. So he's like real pseudoscience type guy. But in using that pseudoscience, like there is truth to a lot of it. And, for somebody who, like me, I'm only going to speak on my own behalf. I didn't trust the systems. I never trust any system. I thought like school, hospitals, law, all of them were corrupt in my mind growing up. And so to hear how I can change my mind, change my belief systems using this pseudoscience, using affirmations and shit like that, and it actually worked, right? So like I started noticing changes, like how he referred me to like a whole bunch of good books. He actually created like a 300 book library on those 2 units of all self-development, spiritual awareness, law of attractions, all these different books, paid for out of his own pocket. And this PEAK program, he wasn't even paid for facilitating it. He volunteered his own time and energy to create this program. And he had the full support of the guards and everything like that. So he gave me a position where I was like a PEAK leader, where I got to facilitate the program in his absence when he wasn't there working. And, I got to a point where guys really listened to me because of that criminal standing that I had. They're like, wow, Kenny, you're doing good right now. Like, you really know this shit. Like, tell me more. I'm open. I'm attentive. I'm listening. And so I told Howie shortly thereafter, I started getting comments like that from people. It's like, listen, we need this on the street, because we kept seeing guys get out of jail in a great mental state. Like, they were reading these books, they were applying the lessons in the books, and we would experiment like that in our own little jail community with these lessons in the books. And then we'd see them come back within like a month, strung out, skinny as shit. And it's like, bro, what happened? Why? You were so good when you left. He's like, I got out to nothing. I didn't have PEAK on the street. I didn't have a group of you guys to talk to. And I just went back to what I knew. So that being said, like, and we've seen that all the time. Like, one of the things that I did when I was in there is I wrote a book with a friend who's actually back in jail right now. We wrote a book together using different lessons out of these other books that we wrote. We just reworded it so it's not plagiarism. And then when I was out, I diligently volunteered every single day since I've been out, and I still volunteer every single day. And it's been over a year and a half now to create this program on the street. And like, we've partnered with Edmonton Public Library. They support us 100%. They say it's the best program they've ever had. We're creating a movement of convicted inmates who are transitioning and changing their life. And like, we have a Facebook group even started for people that were on boot camp and that are now on the street, sober, legit, doing good. And it's a movement for reform. It's a movement for change. And these guys are soaking it up. It's creating a whole new culture of ex-cons. So like, that's one program, the PEAK program,
that you're involved in today.
That I'm involved in today. Like, the textbooks are being printed right away, and we're going to be looking into like buying a big facility to house people and facilitate this program in there. And like Howie and Mike Ryan, he was also on the show before, they went for a meeting with like this guy in the Solicitor General to get this program like officially put back in the institutions, because we've had calls from all of them, Fort Saskatchewan Provincial, Remand, Bowden Penitentiary, Drumheller, like all the staff there. Like, I get personal calls I get calls from staff at these institutions on my personal cell phone, because they hear about this PEAK program. And like, when I mail a guy a letter, sometimes I'll throw my business cards in there for them, and they give it to the staff, and then the staff are calling me and asking me about this program. So it's just on the cusp of really like letting loose and going wild. We have good support from like even the staff that were in the remand. Like, I'm not going to say who, but like, I've been in contact with one of them, and like, he 100% supports this program. And actually he's planning on coming to help with it right away too. The second thing that like I'm involved in that really occupies a lot of my time, and for like when Mike Ryan listens to this, you better pay me more. But we have this thing where we get people who are incarcerated, remanded still. We get them a bed date at a treatment center, and then we call their lawyer, and we work with their lawyer to set up a bail hearing, and then we get them out with a release plan to go to treatment. Like, it's hard for an inmate being in custody to get a bed date at a treatment center. Lots of treatment centers don't want to even talk to the person that's in there because they're a liability, and they're not they don't commit lots of times. You know, they'll just use it as a tactic to get out. But like having a third party organization like what we got going on, we kind of hold them more accountable. Yeah. And then at least I'm on the front line of talking to these guys that are right in jail. So to tell them, yo, listen, man, I've been there too. Like, I've done this, you know, and then they're like, what? Or like I have my friends calling me, hey, I hear this is the bail program. Do you got? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, who is this? And then they tell me their name. I'm like, yo, bro, it's Kenny. They're like, what the fuck are you doing, man? And then I tell them, they're like, wow, okay, I'm calling you as soon as I get out. We're gonna hang out. I need you as a mentor in my life, like stuff like that. So I'm having this huge effect. Like,
I was like, Kenny, you know what I pick up out of those two programs that you talk about, and I can hear it in your voice. You know,
it's passion.
And purpose.
And I
hear purpose. When you have purpose or you have a goal, that helps set you up. Because what I'm hearing is that, and I could be out to lunch on this, guys, but what I'm hearing is like when you get released from remand, you're like, here you are, dropped off in the middle of nowhere. You're going, what WTF now? What now?
Yeah.
Where do I go? What do I do?
You either call your dealer for a cuff, or you go steal something to feed yourself.
So this gives you purpose and gives you a goal, and I think that's one step in the right direction. Because if you got a purpose and you got a goal, and you can maintain focus on that, that will help you so much. Because if you have no goal and you feel you have no purpose in life, well, you just feel like, well, why am I here? So I'll just fall back on anything and everything.
Yeah, prior to me figuring out a way that I can give back and help people, and Justin probably too, like, we were living pure ego, like in an egoic state. And everything's like
megalomania.
Yeah,
that's really what it was. It was megalomania, because when you're part of and I think Kenny and I can both disclose this openly, we were both part of an organization that held clout, so to say. And so because of that, you live in a place where you feel untouchable, right? And when you are touched, it doesn't really matter, because the consequences aren't dire for you really if you're going in there. So as long as you stay on this side of the fence, why change? But then what you start realizing is you're just a spoke in the wheel. And you're not really ever going to be that hero like Mom Boucher. You're not going to be that. Instead, you're going to be the fall down, the junkie, the guy that they talked about who got the living crap beaten out of him, for lack of a better term. That's probably your succession plan to retirement. And I say that with air quotes, right? And once you recognize that, you start going, wow, everything I've ever learned is for me to be nothing. And that's exactly how you feel in that moment. Because I can tell you, for that old lifestyle, I have put myself in situations where I was literally every second of the day betting my life on the next score for a couple $1,000, right? We're talking like when you're talking those kinds of crimes, flat out, they were crimes. And to think that we're so organized that nothing's going to happen to me. This guy's paid and this guy's paid. And even when we go in front of the judge, it's not going to be a big deal, right? Because that's really what it is in that place, right? And then you realize that it's all for nothing. You know, it would be like I don't know if you know who Brock is. He came in on the show. He's the guy who went in front of the Prime Minister of Canada and said, I was prepared to die in Afghanistan and I lost my leg for this country, but I wasn't prepared for the country of Canada to turn its back on me and bring in ex-ISIS fighters into this country for me to have to live with that I fought against in Afghanistan. That's how I felt about that organization. Here I am. I lived, I died, I did everything for this thing. For what? you guys were wrong saying I was a schmuck paying taxes. I was better off paying taxes.
Yeah, that being said, and this is like one of my favorite sayings lately, real gangsters don't hide from the system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Real gangsters change the system. Because like for me growing up, just the word gangster held such high importance and like moral and stuff. Like it's like somebody saying Jesus. Like to me, the word gangster was the same thing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I remember it wasn't about how much it wasn't how you sit at the table. It was how much you bring to the table. Because I can tell you right now, there's one family member in my family who pays the bills for everybody. Right? And so if he asks to be hid, nobody's gonna ask two questions. You know, no, the first one's not even gonna be a thought. Right? That's just the way it is. Like take this bag, but don't look in it. That kind of shit happens. You know what I mean? And why is it? It's because and again, it goes back to that scenery of poverty. It goes back to that scene of nothingness, right? You want to know the richest place in your city? It ain't Rodeo Drive. It ain't in Edmonton, Summerside, or Ellerslie, or even Ada Drive. It's the ghetto. The ghetto is the richest neighborhood you've ever been in your life. Where do you think all that drug money is? Where do you think all that extortion money is? That's where they're hiding it, because those guys, those so-called gangsters, those people who are the leaders within those organizations, they're the ones playing the shell game in that neighborhood. And it's literally a shell game. Back and forth. They're just putting this here, putting that there. And that's the way it's been for a very long time.
You just reminded me of when arresting dialers, right?
Yeah.
a dial-a-dope or a drug dealer.
Yeah. And I remember some of the guys would tell me, right, 'cause you try to develop that relationship with them, and they say, oh, man, I'm screwed. He said, because now you just took all my drugs, you took my couple grand that I had, and now I'm going to owe somebody else, this amount of dollars, and on top of that, because I messed up, now I owe them even more, so I'm going to go in jail, and when I get out, I got to work even twice as hard now to pay back my debt and make sure I don't get shanked.
Yeah, what a solid family.
Right? Yeah.
What a solid crew.
And that's why I tell them, I said, guys, I know you're trying to make money, I said, but you're going to be replaced. As soon as you're inside, you're replaced by somebody else. And you guys know that, right? I don't tell you guys something, no, but that you see that all the time. And that was hard because I'm going, most of these guys, they're not bad people, but it's get stuck.
Yeah.
And you go down that rabbit hole I talk about. It's like, how do you get out? And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I know the mindset because I just jogged my memory. Like I have a relative of mine who did, 6 years for armed robbery. And I remember when he got out, some of my family members said, yeah, we're going to see, for lack of better terms, I'll call this person Jim.
Okay. And
we're going to go see Jim. And I reverted back to my own mindset. And it's like, I'm not going to see Jim. He's a criminal. I can't associate with him. Why am I hanging out with him? I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I start going, no, man. It's like, give the guy a break.
Mm-hmm.
Right? See if he has purpose, right? See if he has a goal to reform, to get back. And if something I can do to help him, I'll do that. But it's hard, right? Because you bounce back and forth in that mindset. Initially, I was like, no, I want nothing to do with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I know what he is. And it took my family to talk to me, and I went, oh, the light bulb went on. It's like, man, maybe I can do something to help him.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And so that's where it gets back to, I don't know, we'll revert back to the beginning of your show, that you talk about sometimes you'd like to maybe have that opportunity to talk to that police officer and say, man, you don't realize it, but when you arrested me or when you said something to me, that was my light bulb moment. And getting back those steps to take to help one another. So I still have revert back, and I still realize at times, like, no, man, don't go in the negative all the time. Think purpose, think goal. What can I do to help that person? Think broad, 10,000-foot view. Don't look in that narrow scope to help people out.
Well, and I think so. We'll go back to clean scene in just a second, okay? Because I know that's where you were going for Kenny, but we'll go back there in just a second.
I want to talk about your projects.
So, because I think it fits for this restorative thing. So I run a thing called St. Dismas House Society. Basically what we do is very similar to the programs that Kenny was talking about. So like we'll go and pitch for bail with John Howard Society. because John Howard Society has a program called Bail Navigator Program. We've also worked with Alberta Health Services in context that our prospective clients have to go to what's called a 3-week program, which is addiction awareness in jail. So they're either sentenced or they can be remanded. And if they cannot get into 3-week program, we will ask the drug and alcohol counselor in the jail to allow this one person in so that they have the prerequisite for our program. Prior to coming to us, they have to apply to a treatment center. I don't care if the treatment center's even seen it. I just need the application form filled out, right? That's basically how it works. So now let's fast forward. We've gone to court the whole bit, and they're going to get bail. So what St. Dismas House does is we actually drive to the jail. We pick them up. We bring them in center. And when we bring them in center, we give them a urinalysis test. And they have to pass the test. Then once they pass the test, they have 6 weeks to sit in center waiting for their bed date. So their bed date is always there. Now, when they're first in, because they have one application form done, what we then do after that is we apply to another 5 to 6 more treatment centers, basically putting them on an emergency list. And the reason why St. Dismas House for most treatment centers is advantageous for them is because our clients are sober. And we continuously piss test them all the way through the process of the 6 weeks. Now, the first 3 modules is addiction awareness, an anger management program, and a life skills program, which is alluding to what Kenny was talking about with a treatment, like a treatment plan. So, and that's in phase 1. Then in phase 2, what we do is there's an Indigenous healing group that we do. So like essentially at the end of it, those clients get to go on a hunt with an elder in the Athabasca region. And then on the other side, there's an Empowerment of Man program. So you can pick either one. And at the end of the Empowerment of Man program, you actually have to get up and do like public speaking. So it's a courage piece to conquer, right? And then after that, at phase 3, this is where we try to get in contact with the arresting officer. And we say, hey, you know what? Our guys have been going through this process. They're not in treatment yet, but they're on their way to treatment. And we're wondering if you would like to engage them because we have all the paperwork, right? We know. And so once that ends up happening, some police officers do, some police officers don't. But then we always try to find a representative, like a community liaison, like Freddie Challenger. Right? Yep. We've tried to get in contact with him once, but his email changed, whatever had happened. So not his fault or any fault of anybody, but that was the reach out process that we had tried. So then what ends up happening is throughout this process, let's say they get an emergency bed. We're ready to take you tomorrow, the treatment center says. We drive them to the treatment center. So we're actually doing the door-to-door. And we're keeping the accountability through the process of urinalysis. At the moment, we do not have a center. So what we have been doing is we're bailing them out on a GPS. So we're talking to, we're working with a GPS company out of Red Deer. Yeah. You know, Vince Morelli.
Yes, I do know
yeah.
Vince.
So what ends up happening is they come out, we throw them on the GPS, and then this allows them.
The ankle bracelet.
No. It's on the wrist. It's like a,
Okay.
yeah.
So, they've updated some of the technology.
Yeah. So, and then what we do is we red zone everything. So if they're in high risk areas, they're on a red zone, and we can tell whether they're on the bus, they're walking, like we can see it. I'm not going to get into exactly how that technology looks, but that's what it does. So essentially what we do is we say, look, you have 5 minutes to get out of there, or else we're breaching you. And it's then takes the weight off of the probation officers. Because I want to tell you, and I think anybody out there who's listening to this show, probation officers are trying to do their jobs. They are social workers, kid you not, with a criminology background. That's what they are. The problem is they don't have sufficient enough programs in order to give restorative justice, such as conditional sentence orders or house arrest, so on and so forth. So we as community, these programs that Kenny and I, and these are not developmental programs, these are working programs. You know, the problem is, as I see it, is there's not enough funding in order to create the reintegration process. So then what ends up happening, what we have in the moment is this. We have these great programs. We have these great programs that are trying to come under one hat. But what we see the government trying to do is they're trying to force feed by saying one needs to be a solution. Well, the way how I see that is every individual is different. And because every individual is different, the program of St. Dismas House is very rigid and strict. And it may not work for everybody. It just may not. But maybe other programs that aren't as rigid and strict will work for them. See, individuals are individuals, and we can't say one program fits all. However, this is the solution that they're looking for. As much as it looks like they're not saying that, I mean, let's face it, there's only 3 different kinds of treatment centers out there, really, when you look at the way how it's ran and programmed and so on and so forth. And there, in my opinion, there needs to be more of these programs so that individuals can look at a program and say, yeah, that fits for me more. This is why at St. Dismas House, we apply to 5 different treatment centers. We apply for short-term, we apply for long-term, and we apply for the middle range. Whichever one says yes, they're gone, they're out the door. Then when they go to treatment, they finish their time. We have access to 25 different apartments around the city. And we do a housing first reintegration process through St. Dismas House. So what ends up happening is we put them back into the community right off the bat, pretty much. They're still on the GPS piece. And then what ends up happening is our home care worker or primary care worker will go into the housing situation every week and make sure that they're engaging with community, they're keeping their jobs, so on and so forth. Really how we get them work experience is St. Dismas House has social entrepreneurial programs. So like we have like a landscaping company, and we also have like a bricklaying company and a bakery and so on and so forth. So all of our clients need not apply. We literally can just say to them, what do you want to do for a living? Because if there's anything I learned in early recovery working in detox centers and intox centers is everybody wants their life fixed 2 days, 3 days, right? But when you're able to say to them, look, life is going to get better very, very quickly. Don't worry about the job piece now because we have work for you. And then essentially what we do is we pay the rent. We pay them. That's the way how it's paid. So they actually don't get cash in their hand. Life is just paid and they're contributing. They get some money in their hand, but not enough to go and grab the next rock or the next ounce or the next, you see what I'm saying? Because I know in my early recovery, money was horrible for me. When I saw all that money, I was like, shit, I want a beer to reward myself. I deserve a treat, right? Well, guess what? My first drink will lead me to the needle of heroin. And it's that fast of a walk. It's not going to take, there's no stop sign in the middle of that. Right? And probably on the way to the walk, I'm going to catch 4 more charges. Because that's what happens all the time for me. That's the math, right? So like these programs, sure, there's portions and pieces of them that are overlapping each other because that's the intake process that we have to have. Because I don't want to be standing in court pitching bail for somebody and they haven't done dick. Can't do that. Because eventually the Crown Attorney, like Dave Hill, is going to look at me and say, I ain't giving you this anymore. No way. It's not going to happen. We cannot have them re-offend. Sure, there are going to be those who do.
But you need a bigger percentage of the ones that don't.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I can tell you this. When St. Dismas House ran a test pilot, so right now, Alberta Health Services, 1 out of 10 make it to treatment. 1 out of 10. That's even at a detox, 1 out of 10. My guys, all 10 made it to treatment. Every single one of them made it to treatment. And we're talking 2 years now after the test pilot or proof of concept. 6 of them are still engaged in long-term recovery. You know what AHS is out of 10? It's 2. They get 2 after 2 years that is engaged in what they consider long-term treatment after a year. My guys are 2 years at 6.
That's impressive.
And so if you look at the fundamental beginning, that developmental stage, there's camaraderie for guys coming out of jail when they go into a house in that situation. The first 3 days, they're not allowed out. They're on what's called the sight and sound observation. They can leave if they want, but they're not allowed to come back. And so this allows them to debrief with the staff. And the staff are sitting there saying 24 hours a day, you can't sleep, come talk to me. Talk to me about your PTSD. And I've done this with clients where I've said, what family members did you do time with? Because it's a systemic issue, right? And then they start talking, and then they start talking about some of the stuff that they went through while they were in there. And then all of a sudden you see that prison pop right off their shoulders. It's not on them anymore. They're not walking around like convicts anymore because they realize in that moment, I don't have to wear that label any longer, right? Because that is the critical moment when they come out. Which way are they turning, left or right? And we need to be the ones who are at the gate taking them out of there.
The first time I got out of jail, it totally changed my whole life. My whole perspective on who I was and what I was going to do for the rest of my life went down the shithole. Like, I thought that I was like super gangster. I was absolutely ruthless and reckless, like not a care in the world, because when you come out of incarceration, you have PTSD from being in solitary confinement or from being like abused emotionally, mentally by the staff. Like there's trauma, and
100%.
And because of that trauma while you're in there, when you get out to the street, you carry it with you and you don't give a fuck. Like,
well, you already have that concept from poverty. Like, I'm getting mine. Fuck you, you owe me.
Yeah, but then when you get out, it's way worse.
It's way worse when you get out. Because now you see these people who wear uniforms, reinforcing the uniforms that were out on the street. That's the perception. Not that it's the reality. That's the perception, though, from the criminal side, right? I honestly believe that drug dealing is a crime of poverty. That's what it is. As much as it becomes a crime of addiction, it's actually a crime of poverty. I mean, how else are you going to make $10,000 a week? Shit, I only made 10 grand a week when I wasn't using drugs. So then all of a sudden, drugs aren't making you that money. Then you go into prostitution as a pimp. Then you go into extortion. Then you go into, and now you're not a drug dealer, you're a gangster, because you don't have just one repertoire. You have 4 or 5 other repertoires now.
A racketeer.
Yeah. Right? You're the entrepreneur of the criminal world. And that's what it becomes. Right? Because this avenue isn't giving you what you need. So then you start thinking, well, what else can I do? Right? And that's the evolution of it, really.
And I can see when you talk about breaking that barrier, so the uniform can be a barrier for you. Because I can remember when the old Advantage Motel was open.
Oh, yeah.
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 Right, 38 Gateway. So I basically lived at that place for 6 months. And I remember when I first started hanging there, that was a project of mine. And I remember trying to talk to people that stayed there, and they were like, F you, I'm not talking to you, effing pig.
Yeah.
And I kept coming back and back. And it's like, hey, man, how you doing? Hey, what's up? Eventually, I started telling them, like, this is who I am. It's like, I tell people, it's like, I'm a person like anybody else. The problem is, when I get up in the morning, I put a uniform on, I got a job to do. And so when I'm here to do that job, I said, I'm not here to bust your chops. I said, but I'm here to communicate with you. I want to talk. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But eventually, day after day, week after week, people saw past me, past the uniform. They just saw as me. And it was weird because they started telling me about their drug dealing. They started telling me about their issues at home, how they were abused, the problems that they're going through, the illness that they were going through. Like, there was one she had, what happened to her? I think her boyfriend at the time beat the crap out of her, and she lost her eyesight. And so I was actually changing her patch on her eye and putting ointment into her eye. Mm-hmm. And people say, you're doing what?
Yeah.
Because you get past that. But that's the problem, too, because I'm bouncing around, but as police officers, there's so many calls for service out there where we just go call to call to call to call to call. It's so hard to have that ability to take that time to engage that guy or that girl on the street and try to build that rapport, build that relationship to get that communication and trust.
I have a question, and I'm just going to float this, and I think you'll appreciate this too. Well, I think you both will appreciate this. It just kind of hit me. You guys don't maybe have the time on the street, right? Like as a beat cop, for sure, because there's call after call after call. What if there were life coaches that were associated to the police, where the police paid them to be these reformed convicts that are liaisons for the police into these communities?
Like a mediator?
Well, not even a mediator, like more like in the process of like at that motel.
Yeah.
Where we would go in and talk about life skills. And we would literally walk in like you had your jacket on with the police emblem. I'm not saying that we're police, but we're definitely visibly attached to them without being in a uniform. And we are also, like I said, a real life coach.
I know where you're going with it, and I think there's some validity to your proposal, and because I look at it this way, we have PACT, right? And PACT is a police officer, right, and a mental health worker.
Yeah.
So they actually go and check on people with mental illness.
Yeah.
And so the police officer's there, but yet that counseling aspect is there as well. So there's some validity into what you're saying, that if I'm walking the beat and if people don't have difficulty talking to me, it's like, hey, look at my colleague here. And if you want me to separate that, I'll step over here, have a conversation. And maybe next day I'm a step closer and I'm a step closer, but you can build that relationship together.
Hey,
in
Mike.
patrol would be so hard. You can't do it in patrol because the guys and girls are just too busy.
And we would do the follow-up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
Hey, Mike, on air, on the record, will you be my friend? Now I have a cop friend. Sick. Times are fucking changing.
Hey, well, let's look at it. We've already met for coffee. I'm here talking to you. You think I'm going to lose contact with you?
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I have a question. What's NET?
Neighborhood Empowerment Team.
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know if I can really define that for you. So NET actually, from when I think of NET, I think about it as a CLC, which is a Community Liaison Constable. So you're almost like you're a jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's not the best way to describe it.
It's like Freddie Challenger. It's like Freddie Challenger.
So
much. Yeah.
You're there. So to give me so I was a CLC, and so my job was to, if I had a speaking engagement, I'd go and talk to that school. If there was a problem in the neighborhood, I'd go hang out. So when I talk about the Advantage Motel, I'd hang out there because
just the presence of you will have an effect.
But because patrol, you don't have time. That's call, and you move on. But NET CLCs, they have the ability to actually take the time to be in that community, hang out, answer questions. Because I know you'll see sometimes, I don't know if you see it on Twitter and Facebook or whatnot, there'll be like cop talk, and they're like, police are going to be at Second Cup for the next 2 hours. Come down and chat.
Or Carrot Cafe.
Yeah. That type of thing, right? And I think that has purpose. The problem can be is that barrier. How do I feel comfortable enough approaching that member and talking, right? Because you get back to, not everyone, but some people have that. You talk about trauma, right? And I've got a hard time getting past that uniform barrier.
Fuck, tell me about it, man. The first time I went and talked to you, I almost shit my pants. I met Mike at an awards, the Lieutenant Governor Circle Awards on Addiction and Mental Health, and I spotted him from a mile away, and I seen his pin on his suit, his police crest pin, and I was like, oh shit, that's a cop. So I was like trying to look at him out of the corner of my eye, and I was trying to formulate a plan on how I can approach this guy, because Justin and I have been talking for a while about trying to get a police officer on, and then I finally had the nuts to walk up to you and say hi and introduce myself. And when you were like, hey, before you say anything, I just want to let you know that you're doing a great job, and if I can do anything to help you, I'm game. And it totally took away all the years of stigma of my dad saying all cops are fags and just ignorant as shit. But and then our first time having a conversation, we went for coffee. It was this guy's all right, and he actually has the same purpose and passion that you and I do, Justin.
Yeah.
It's to help people.
And we're just taking it from different angles. That's all.
Yeah. I think even in that conversation, I said the police is. It's unfortunate that one of the biggest tools that the police have is the hammer, and that's really it. If you're dealing with the police, you're going to jail. That's not all the time, but that's the perception. Right.
Well, I've actually apologized to some members, and I go, I'm sorry, man. I have no other alternative. I have to lay these charges.
Yeah.
I wish I couldn't, but my hands are tied on this, and we have to go. But I will help you through this.
Yeah.
All right. And so that's steps you got to do, and it's nothing worse than you have to go. You have to. There's some things you don't want to do in life, but it's like telling somebody, I can't help you. I hate saying that, but there's times you make that. It has to be that way, and there's times I don't want to lay charges on you, my friend, but I have no other option here to do so. But I will help you through this process if you allow me, right? So it's
well, now you can refer him to me and Justin, so we can help him on
Right,
the latter end of the
And
process.
I kind of think like we're an hour and a half in now.
This is the longest show ever.
So this is one of the longest shows that we've ever had. But I think, you know what, it goes into a really good depth. We'll probably have a part 2 to this at some point, maybe next year,
Guys,
whenever your schedule prevails to do so.
Your listeners may say I'm full of it, but I mean it when I say this. I'm honestly saying to you right now in front of your face that if I can help you guys help somebody on the street in any capacity, I'm in.
Well,
I'm game.
I think I'm going to leave it at this. We batted around some really good ideas about some community programs. You and I know some people from Edmonton Police Foundation. We know some people, and like I knew Rod Connect, who was a great guy. He was really endorsed St. Dismas House when it came out. Remember, he said he had a whole bunch of money for the old Remand Center, and I was like, you know what? I have a building right now. Give me the money right now. And then within 2 days later, he wasn't the police chief anymore. So that kind of went away.
I know we can talk about this later. Probably was that the gym idea that you're proposing?
No, this was St. Dismas House itself for the actual center.
Yeah, I got
but
you.
we'll definitely talk about the gym. And so maybe next time when we come in, we'll get these we'll do an update of some of the brainstorming that we did, and then we'll just bring it right on the show, because I think as much as this is an Edmonton issue,
it's a country issue.
This is a Western society issue, especially in North America.
Yeah.
Especially in America, which is like to a whole new level than what we are.
Yeah.
Really they are. So I think we'll do the see what we can get started, see what we can do, see where it all fits, and we'll come back and do an update for all the listeners and be that example.
Let's try to work ourselves out of our jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I have a podcast. This is my most favorite job throughout the entire week. Did you have a good time?
I did, guys. And you know something I love? When you guys talk about it, I feel the compassion, the energy you guys have for it, and the purpose, right? So for your listeners out there, I want to say thank you so much. And once again, I applaud what you guys are doing. And for the listeners as well, if you're down that hole, I know you think you have no place to go, but there are options out there. Mm-hmm. And if you can just get that strength and that energy to reach out, somebody is there. It could be one of us, but it could be somebody else. We're there to help in some capacity. Mm-hmm. Just get that energy to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in, Mike.
No,
I appreciate all of your time this morning.
Yeah, me too.
Wrap it up, brother.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is one of our best episodes, but please subscribe. Tell all your friends about how sick this show is, because it's awesome. You can find our blog and all our episodes at www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com
or Google Life on Life's Terms Canada.
Life on Life's Terms Canada. We will pop up. We have Facebook, Life on Life's Terms Podcast. We have Instagram, Life on Life's Terms Podcast. And we want you to contact us on all platforms.
Get on that email list.
Become a member of the tribe.